Hey there, Vinnie Mirchandani. Pleasure to have Andre Blumberg. And for all of us who've been stuck at home, this is hopeful. Andre is in his office in Hong Kong. He works for CLP Power, which is one of the biggest players in the Asia Pacific utility sector. Andre, why don't you introduce yourself? And I have one question for you in addition. How have you kept in shape for your ultra marathons while we've all been quarantined?
Yeah, thanks, Vinny. It's a pleasure to be on. I really appreciate it. I'm from Germany originally, but I've been living in Asia for the last 25 years. I have worked in consulting, doing large regional ERP implementation in the 90s, and have been with CLP, one of the large regional electricity companies here in Asia, since the early 2000s. So CLP is a 120-year-old company here in Hong Kong, headquartered here, listed on the stock exchange. We are vertically integrated in Hong Kong, so we generate electricity. We have the network business, and we also have the retail and sales. We serve about 80% of the market here in Hong Kong. Hong Kong has around 7.8 million population. And we also have expanded into the Asia Pacific region. So we have investments in primarily generation in China, a mix of traditional fuel, as well as extensive renewable investments. And likewise, we've invested in India and in Australia. India also generation, but we're going into the network business in addition. And in Australia, we are a gentailer. So we have generation and retail because the market regulation is different in every country. Yeah, you were alluding to my hobby. I like running. I like ultra running. It keeps me sane. It gives me a lot of time to think. And fortunately, in Hong Kong,
actually, Andre, that's insane the amount you run. But go ahead.
We've been fortunate in Hong Kong not to have lockdown, so we were still able to get around, out and about on country trails and in country parks. So that's been quite good.
Great. Andre, we've been seeing a lot of acrobatics in China, in Europe, and now in the US. All kinds of manufacturing, supply chain, healthcare, acrobatics. We don't think of utilities as doing energetic acrobatic stuff, but I'm sure you've had your operations, your field service, your customer-facing stuff. I'm sure you've had some acrobatics. So take some credit. Tell us about them.
Well, Vinny, it's an interesting industry. We have one product. You can't see it. You better don't touch it. If it's there, you don't give us credit, as you said. You take it for granted. And if it's not there, then you get very annoyed very quickly. And especially in a city like Hong Kong, which is a vertical city. So we got 60,000 high-rise buildings. 50% of the population live or work on the 15th floor or above. So that's a lot of elevators and lifts that can no longer work when the electricity supply is becoming unreliable. So reliability is really, really very critical. And if you also think about a crisis such as the pandemic and hospital infrastructure and other critical infrastructure that relies on electricity, I think that really makes it even more important. We've done all sorts of things. We looked at obviously how we can keep our field operations going. We have implemented field force scheduling and obviously mobilization. We're also investing extensively in modernizing our generation infrastructure and going to cleaner fuels and help decarbonize the economy. So we're moving from coal to natural gas. And we actually have a number of mega projects going on right now. Interestingly, the supply chain hasn't really been so much of an impact for us. We've been still able to receive the construction materials and equipment. The challenge has been to get the experts in because all the borders are closed. So we can't get the engineering experts in and so on. So we basically using telecommuting, and we have safety hard hats with video cameras on top and using 4G and increasingly 5G here in Hong Kong to walk the site, to walk the construction site and plant, and then collaborate with engineers in Germany from Siemens and GE in the US and so on. So you become quite inventive. On the customer side, we've been rolling out smart meters, and it's interesting when you look at these business cases initially, and then often you don't really appreciate the context of a crisis or a pandemic, obviously. So we're moving from manual meter reads every 2 months to automated meter reads using network connectivity every 30 minutes or 15 minutes. And this gives us much better ability to give customers energy insights and helps them to manage their electricity. So with that come new digital channels, new web apps. We launched a new mobile app a couple of weeks ago at the right time as well, as people stay home and enjoy more sophistication on self-service. We also working on furthering our chatbot investments for taking traffic off the call center, and we see customers as well increasingly requiring a self-service kind of mindset. So there's a lot of things going on, and I think it's really interesting to see that technology is able to step up in times of crisis and make that difference, and also then helps us overcome our maybe traditional apprehension of changing processes, of changing behavior. And I think that firm nudge around the culture change is certainly helpful to get the technology moving forward as well.
Andre, you say you haven't been disrupted as much. Part of that, I'm sure, goes back to your SARS experience in 2003, right? Asia seems much more prepared for this, but just that experience couldn't have been enough, right? I've seen South Korea with pop-up testing sites. I've seen drones used very creatively all across Asia. So tell us about some of the newer technologies you've seen that have really kicked in and helped your recovery. Frankly, I don't even think you had anything dramatic in Hong Kong, right? You weren't affected.
We've been very fortunate in Hong Kong, as you say. We went through the SARS epidemic in 2002 and 2003, and that's been a big shock to Hong Kong with a lot of fatalities. And Hong Kong really was the center of the SARS incident back then. And fortunately, a lot of lessons have been learned, a lot of improvements have been taken. And if you look at the way the COVID-19 was handled here, it was really full into action straight away. It coincided actually with Chinese New Year at the end of January, so it was 3 months ago, and we really went into very detailed contact tracing and elaborating around understanding where movements were of people. Lockdown was initiated, borders were closed fairly quickly. And we've just had 3 weeks of zero new local infection. So we had a couple single-digit cases due to people flying in or traveling in, but less than 1,100 infections and only 4 fatalities. So we've been really leveraging this, and obviously with that comes technologies as well. So government rolled out wristbands for quarantine, observation, and geofencing to make sure people really do stay at home. We flow a lot of people that are staying at home and don't want to go out. We've had partial restaurant closures, or restaurant capacity was capped at maybe 50%. We had a cap on maximum 4 people going out at one time in terms of groups. And so restaurant deliveries and take home was going through the roof. So then you see companies like Uber Eats and Deliveroo and Food Panda and so on really stepping up. And so those have been around before, but I think they're really excelling in this crisis. The other point to note is that there's a very, very high mobile adoption in Asia and generally. So if you sit on the subway in Hong Kong and China, everyone around you has the latest smartphone. We are blessed with really very good infrastructure here. As I mentioned earlier, 5G is available. Bandwidth speeds are incredible and reliable and so on. So the digitization is really, again, from a consumer perspective, helping that as well. And mobile payments are everywhere. So it's Alipay and WeChat Pay, and it's massive in China, and it's increasing in Hong Kong as well.
And I guess, you non-digital in Asia, masks are so common. You walked in before the interview started with a mask. So I'm sure that helps a lot in a situation like this. Andre, tell us how your utilization has changed. I mean, clearly home consumption probably went up. How has India done? How is your commercial bit? What has the switch been, and how have you handled that switch in consumption?
Yeah, it's interesting because electricity consumption is actually a very, very good indicator of economic activity by different segments. And there's close correlation with that. And obviously, we've seen a drop in certain segments, such as hotels. The borders are shut, so tourists are staying away, business travelers are staying away. I spoke about restaurants earlier. Naturally, with work from home and homeschooling, the schools are still closed in Hong Kong at this stage. We've seen an increase in residential consumption. Some of the large transport consumption has been slightly affected as well. Airport, for example, some of the trains up to China. But on the other hand, we've seen massive increase in data center consumption, right? So everyone is using video conferencing like this, and schools are using it everywhere, and so that's noticeable in our area as well. Across the region, it really varies. China at this point is back into business. They're opening up, and we can see it in energy consumption. So they're basically already out at the other end of this. India is the other extreme. They're still in a countrywide lockdown, and it's very challenging there. India in general, pandemic aside, is a country where we still have 500 or 600 million people without reliable access to daily electricity. And so there's still a huge opportunity there. In Australia, we've had, prior to COVID, huge bushfires to deal with as well, right? So they went from one crisis into the next. So it's been pretty challenging there as well.
Wow. Tell us a little about, clearly your consumption has been up and down across customers. How has that affected your IT? How did you manage from work from home? Did you have to do quite a few maneuvers in IT?
Yeah, it basically impacted us straight after Chinese New Year, which is a major public holiday here in Asia, similar to Christmas in the West. And so a lot of people were home, and it is generally a quieter period as well. So whilst we were on Chinese New Year leave, the news was spreading, and we started with our emergency preparedness and elevated our alert levels as well. And we've seen a 700% increase in remote access requirements from our staff. So we had to step up, and the team did, to make sure we have the right capacity available. Fortunately, our investments in remote access and a mobile, digital, modern workforce had put us into good stead, but there was still some capacity uplifts required. We've also had to rethink some of the other areas that we normally take for granted. For example, last week we had our shareholder meeting, our annual general meeting, and typically we have 1,500 people coming into a large hotel ballroom, and aggregate is very popular, and people meet, and shareholders meet and greet our board and a chairman, and it's very interpersonal, and obviously in terms of COVID that it was not feasible. The listing rules locally do require us to hold a physical meeting, but what we actually did was a hybrid annual general meeting, a hybrid AGM. We quickly set up a system to do a raffle among shareholders, because we limited the on-site to 50 people. We also then split our board up to make sure they can practice social distancing. So we had 3 board members in the, this is our energy saving in the meeting room. Apologies for that, but we practice energy saving.
Yeah, it's good to see sensors work.
Yes, that's right, and it's a large boardroom, and I'm the only one, so maybe it's not it's a bit not sensitive enough. Yeah, so we had a hybrid AGM where we split our board actually into different facilities, and then used live video streaming so we could entertain questions, and it went out to the website as well. We had an online voting system over the internet as well. So I think that's a good innovation there as well. And I think cloud computing in general has been able to help us significantly. And we've been on the cloud journey for a number of years. And Vinnie, you always sort of have a challenge sometimes explaining why are we doing this, what is the business case. It's an industry very focused on capital investments. Traditionally, you have very long a range of investment cycles. If you invest in a power plant, you're talking 40, 50 years. Now, cloud is more of an expense and a subscription service. So that has taken a bit of explanation and discussion and so on. But I'm really glad that we've done it. And the storyline now is whether it's a social unrest incident, and Hong Kong had a lot of demonstrations last year impacting staff getting to work and so on, whether it's a extreme weather event such as a super typhoon which battered Hong Kong about 2 years ago, and you live in Florida, so you'll be familiar with hurricanes and flooding, and or whether it's a global pandemic or an economic crisis. I think cloud computing is great in terms of being able to flex up and down and being just more agile and bringing up new services very quickly. So that, I think, has traditionally maybe been not seen really if you look at business cases and strategies and so on. But dealing with crisis, and I think dealing with emergencies and looking at business continuity options, I think it's unfortunately the new normal. And this is, again, where I think technology leaders have the opportunity and the mission to step up and make a difference.
Andre, it's funny you say that. I interviewed the CEO of Workday, and he said in his previous company, PeopleSoft, he says, if I had still been there, we would have had to ship to our customer servers to be able to handle the loads we've been able to handle. So, to your point, cloud computing has the flexing of capacity and people, right? Both has been significant. Where do you see a sector going in the next few years? Adjacent markets. I know you looked at, your technology as a platform, right? So you were looking at other products and services. Does this open up new opportunities?
Yeah, the energy sector is under huge changes. So we like to talk about the 3D. So decarbonization. So we're moving from fossil fuel to renewables. We're looking at reducing carbon emission, carbon intensity per kilowatt hour generated. Decentralization. So traditionally, the utility business is a very centralized model where you have large scale generation, and then you have one-way flow of electrons into the network and then to end consumers. But we see now with renewable, with distributed generation, that is changing. We have rolled out renewable programs here in Hong Kong for customers to put solar rooftops on their house. Most people live in apartments in Hong Kong, but some do live in village houses, so they have the opportunity. And then they sell electricity back to us. So the electrons now flow the other way, and customers will be compensated for that. The third D is digitalization, obviously, right? So we see a lot in that area. And maybe one way to describe the industry is we're moving from kilowatt economy to kilobyte economy.
Wow.
And
okay.
Increasingly, the trends that we've seen in other industry take place in energy as well. And to give you an example, the platform business model that has made many digital startups so successful, be it Amazon or Uber or Airbnb. So you ask yourself, what is the business platform model for a utility company, right? So we are working on this. We've launched a Smart Energy Connect platform, which basically provides a brokerage service between different partners that we work with. We have an app store, and we provide pluggable components to customers, mostly at this stage in the commercial and industrial space. But these are solutions to manage your energy consumption. If you are a facilities manager in a large shopping center or an hotel, then you can use these solutions to get better insights and reduce your consumption and optimize. So we're investing heavily in that area as well. But then also, I think more fundamentally, business models are changing. You see some of the oil majors coming into our industry. Shell is publicly announced they are investing about 2 billion euro every year in utilities. They have made utility acquisitions in Australia, for example. Tesla 2 weeks ago has applied for a utility license to operate in the UK. We see BP making big investments in energy startups as well related to electricity. So I think the industry lines are blurring, and we've seen this in other verticals as well. And I think it's a shift from just selling a commodity. We've spoken earlier about the importance of the commodity and the importance of the reliability and the availability of this commodity, the electrons. But I think we see this moving more into packaged services and energy management services around it as well, and then can look at further opportunities for us in terms of harvesting the value chain around these new services as well.
So you mentioned decarbonization. Even with oil prices negative, you expect that to continue?
I don't think the short-term blip in oil prices will make any change in renewable investments. So we see a significant trend line that is very static, going down in terms of the cost model for renewables. And Hong Kong is a very small place and a very dense place. It's difficult to do large-scale renewables here. But if you look at many other countries, Australia, India, China, there's plenty of space. And I think the renewable investments will continue. Globally, we do see continuation of decarbonization. The challenge traditionally with renewables is the intermittency. So the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow. So you still need backup capacity, and that traditionally has been conventional fuels such as coal or gas or nuclear. The interesting thing, and I think that's quite a game changer to our industry, if you look at our product, you have historically to produce our product and ship it at the time of consumption, because historically you can't store our product. Yep. It's not like you go and do manufacturing and you put it in a warehouse for the Christmas sale and the peak season at the end of the year. Now the game changer is battery storage, and you can now actually store electricity. This may sound simple, but it is, in my view, a game changer, because the cost of battery storage, and I'm not talking about your iPhone capacity, I'm talking about large utility grid scale storage. The cost is coming down significantly. There are still a number of safety issues to be overcome, but I'm sure that will be solved. And then you finally are able to store at a large scale renewable energy, which is produced during the day, in the morning and late at night, and then that equilibrium between production and consumption can be solved. The other area is electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are batteries on wheels, and again, traditionally the electrons go one way, but if you think about aggregating a large fleet of electric vehicles, and then when consumption is high, everybody comes home from work at 7 or 8 p.m. And then switch on the air cons in summer, so that's when we have our peak. And then you could move the electricity from electric vehicles back into the grid to help support this. So going back to our business platform model, how about you have a model where you have a mobile app and you incentivize electric vehicle owners? There may be your customers, there may not be your customers. To say, okay, if you and you can have a dial, and you can say, okay, let me as a utility company manage your battery capacity, and allow me to take up to 10 or 15 or 50%, whatever you prefer, of your car battery between certain times of the day or night, and then I compensate you for that. So I think that will be having a lot of opportunity, and that's where the new business models come in.
Pretty neat. You know, Andre, I've been asking people, like, do you expect a V recovery or U recovery and so on? Sounds like you're already in a V recovery. So that is great to see. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's not just a V recovery. I think it's a lower V recovery. I think it's been pretty quick here. China has opened up again. I think Hong Kong hopefully will return as well. India is still in a lockdown, as we said. So, but hopefully, as a global community, we will be able to overcome this challenge. So I have very high hopes, and I think we need to brace ourselves that it's going to take some time. It's not going to be over anytime soon. I do think that once borders start to open up again and we allow travel, then infections will naturally rise. But I think as long as it's in manageable dimensions, I think that will be good. And then we all look forward to getting out of this at the end of the day.
Well, look forward to hosting one of your ultra marathons in Florida. Thank you very much.
There are quite a few. I'd love to do one there. Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinnie.
Bye-bye.